Crime lord pays a homeless woman to have a child and accidentally falls in love. Hey there, I'm Alex, your guide through today's extraordinary tale on Hearts of Crime. What you're about to witness is a story of passion and danger that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, when I say the twist at the end will leave you absolutely speechless. If you enjoy these forbidden love stories, please hit that like button and drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our daily uploads of these incredible stories. Stay with me until the very end. I promise the conclusion will shock you in ways you can't imagine. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode. Have a wonderful day, and may God bless you and your family. The rain poured mercilessly over the city's gleaming skyscrapers and forgotten alleyways alike, drenching both the powerful and the powerless. Nathan Cole watched from his penthouse window as lightning illuminated the urban landscape he controlled from the shadows. His reflection stared back at him, impeccably tailored suit, chiseled jawline, and eyes that had witnessed things most people couldn't imagine. "Mr. Cole, the doctor is here," announced his assistant, breaking his trance. Nathan turned, his expression unchanged. "Send him in." Dr. Williams entered, clutching his medical bag nervously. After examining Nathan, he delivered the news with practiced detachment. "The tests are conclusive. You'll be unable to father children naturally. If an heir is your goal, adoption or surrogacy are your only options." After the doctor left, Nathan sat alone, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass. The empire he built, legitimate businesses on the surface, masking a vast criminal network, needed an heir. His brothers were dead, his cousins untrustworthy. A legacy without continuation was no legacy at all. Weeks later, he found himself in his sleek black car, driving through the city's forgotten districts. He'd heard rumors of desperate people willing to do anything for money. Nathan wasn't known for sentiment. He was a businessman above all else. Every problem had a price tag. That S when he saw her. Huddled beneath a partially collapsed awning, a woman sat reading a tattered book by the dim light of a street lamp. Despite her circumstances, there was a dignity in her posture that caught his attention. Her face, though smudged with dirt, revealed striking cheekbones and deep, intelligent eyes. Nathan instructed his driver to stop. Curiosity, more than compassion, drove him to approach her. "What are you reading?" he asked, startling her. The woman looked up, instantly wary. "Why do you care?" Her voice carried an unexpected softness, contradicting her harsh surroundings. Nathan noticed her belongings: a worn backpack, some carefully folded clothes, and, remarkably, several books protected in plastic bags. "I'm merely curious why someone in your position would prioritize reading over other necessities." So she stood up, revealing her full height, tall and graceful despite her worn clothes. "Just because I am homeless doesn't mean I've abandoned my mind. Now, unless you offering help without strings attached, which men like you never do, I suggest you return to whatever luxury awaits you." Her boldness amused him. Most people cowered in his presence, sensing the danger beneath the polished exterior. But this woman, with nothing to her name, challenged him. "Size, what if I were offering help, with substantial strings attached, admittedly? I'm not that kind of desperate," she replied sharply. Nathan laughed. "Not that. I am proposing a business arrangement, a conversation at minimum. I am Nathan Cole." Her eyes widened slightly at the name. Even in her world, Nathan Cole was known, the businessman with the golden touch and whispered connections to less reputable enterprises. "Fias Melanie Parrish," she finally offered, reluctantly placing her book in her bag. "What kind of business could someone like you possibly have with someone like me?" "The private kind. Will you join me for dinner? Somewhere we can talk?" Melanie hesitated, sizing him up. "How do I know this isn't a dangerous?" "You done a tea," Nathan replied honestly. "But I suspect your current situation presents daily dangers. At least this one comes with a hot meal." The upscale restaurant's staff nearly refused Melanie entry until Nathan's glare reminded them who paid their exorbitant bills. In a private room, over the first proper meal she had in months, Nathan explained his proposition. "I need an heir, Medical issues prevent me from fathering a child naturally. Adoption agencies don't look favorably on single men with my reputation. I need a woman to carry a child through donor insemination and surrender all parental rights. In exchange, I am offering $5 million. Melanie nearly choked on her water. You want to buy a baby from me? I want to employ your services as a surrogate. Everything done legally with proper medical care. You want for nothing during the pregnancy. Afterward, you be free to start a new life with your payment. Why me? There are professional surrogates. Nathan leaned forward. Professional surrogates ask questions. They want to know about the child's future. They have families who notice if they disappear. You're invisible to society. No one would miss you if you spent 9 months in seclusion. The calculated coldness of his assessment made Melanie push back her chair. You're a monster. I am practical, and I am offering you a way out of your situation. By selling you a human being? By providing a service many women provide. The difference is the compensation I am offering could change your life permanently. Melanie stood to leave, but Nathan continued calmly. Before you walk away, consider this. Where will you sleep tonight? What will you eat tomorrow? How long before your remarkable intelligence is dulled by the constant struggle to survive? She paused, her hand gripping the chair. I have one condition. Nathan raised an eyebrow. You are hardly in a position to negotiate. Yet here I am negotiating. I want guaranteed education for the child, the best schools regardless of whether it's a boy or girl, and proof that you'll provide it. Nathan studied her face, the determination in her eyes contrasting with the vulnerability of her situation. This wasn't mere desperation. This was someone who had principles despite having nothing. Agreed, he said finally. We'll draw up contracts tomorrow. What began as a business transaction soon grew complicated. Nathan insisted Melanie move into his guest house immediately to ensure proper nutrition and health before the procedure. Under his roof, seeing her daily, he began noticing things about her that intrigued him. She devoured his library, discussing literature and philosophy with a depth that surprised him. She refused his offers of expensive clothes, accepting only necessities. And most disturbingly for Nathan, she showed no fear of him, even after witnessing him handle a threatening phone call with chilling efficiency. You know what I am, he stated one evening, finding her on the terrace after he'd concluded some particularly unsavory business in his office. I know what you do, Melanie corrected, looking up from her book. Not who you are. There is no difference. There is always a difference. Otherwise, you wouldn't be so intent on having a child. Her observation struck uncomfortably close to something Nathan himself hadn't fully acknowledged. Weeks passed, and the medical procedures began. Throughout it all, a strange familiarity grew between them. Not quite friendship, certainly not romance, but something unexpected in a relationship founded on transaction. Then came the night that changed everything. Nathan returned home severely injured after a meeting gone wrong. Refusing hospitals, which would require police reports, he stumbled into his home, leaving a trail of blood across imported marble floors. Melanie found him collapsing in his study, and instead of running or calling authorities, she calmly gathered first aid supplies and began cleaning his wounds. Why are you helping me? Nathan asked through gritted teeth as she extracted a bullet from his shoulder. Her hands remained steady, her voice calm. Because right now you are not a crime lord or a businessman. You are just a person who will die without help. As dawn broke, with Nathan bandaged and feverish, Melanie sat beside him, monitoring his condition. In his delirium, he spoke of his childhood, of violence and loss that had shaped him into the man he became. And Melanie began to see what lay beneath the carefully constructed facade of Nathan Cole, something neither of them had bargained for when they made their dangerous arrangement. The morning after Nathan's injury, Melanie awoke, slumped in a chair beside his bed. He watched her through half-lidded eyes, studying the woman who had possibly saved his life, and who carried what would become his child. You didn't have to stay, he said, his voice rough with pain. Melanie straightened, immediately alert. You had a fever. Someone needed to make sure you didn't die. Would that have been so terrible? The question slipped out before Nathan could catch it. She gave him a long look. Yes, It would have been. Something shifted between them that morning. A door opened that neither had intended to unlock. As Nathan recovered, their conversations grew longer, the silences between them more comfortable. He found himself sharing details of his business that no one else knew. She began to speak of her past, a privileged upbringing destroyed by her parents, financial ruin and subsequent death, leaving her adrift in a world she wasn't prepared to navigate. "How did someone with your education end up on the streets?" Nathan asked one evening as they sat on his terrace, the city lights glimmering below them. Melanie's fingers traced the rim of her teacup. Pride, mostly. When everything collapsed, distant relatives offered help with conditions attached. Marriage to a business associate, essentially selling myself to repair family connections. I chose freedom instead. Freedom to starve. Freedom to make my own mistakes. She smiled faintly. Though I didn't anticipate quite how difficult it would be. The world isn't kind to women without resources. Yet here you are, selling yourself to me, Nathan pointed out. Melanie met his gaze steadily. I am selling a service, not myself, and I chose this arrangement with open eyes. Did you? His voice softened. Did either of us truly understand what we were agreeing to? The medical confirmation arrived on a rainy Tuesday. The procedure had been successful. Melanie was pregnant. What should have been a moment of simple business satisfaction for Nathan instead filled him with complicated emotions. He found himself increasingly protective of Melanie, installing additional security systems and hiring a personal chef to cater to her changing appetites. Marcus Landry, Nathan's right-hand man, and the only person who knew the full truth about the arrangement, watched these developments with growing concern. "You were getting attached," Marcus warned during a private meeting. "That wasn't the plan." Nathan dismissed his concerns with a wave. "I am protecting my investment. Is that why you have been running background checks on every medical professional within 50 miles? Why you personally interviewed 17 potential obstetricians?" Marcus placed a folder on Nathan's desk. "Or why you've been investigating her past so thoroughly?" Nathan did not answer, instead flipping open the folder to review information he'd already memorized about Melanie's life. "This was supposed to be straightforward," Marcus continued. "As she gives you a child, you give her money, she disappears. Now you're having dinner with her every night, discussing books, sharing parts of your operation you've never told anyone else. Your point?" "My point is that she is becoming a liability. People are noticing. Rivera's crew has been asking questions about the woman living in your guest house." Nathan's expression hardened. "Let them ask. Anyone who comes near her will regret it." "Most, that is exactly what I am talking about," Marcus sighed. "You've never let anyone close enough to become a weakness. Now you have two." The threat became real sooner than either anticipated. Nathan returned home early from a business meeting to find the security system disabled and the front door ajar. With cold fury guiding his movements, he drew his gun and entered silently. He found Melanie in the kitchen, a knife in her hand, facing 3 armed men. One was bleeding from a slash across his arm, evidence that she had not been taken easily. "Step away from her," Nathan commanded, his voice deadly quiet. The intruders turned, and Nathan recognized Rivera's enforcers immediately. The leader smiled unpleasantly. "Nicole, we were just getting acquainted with your guest. Rivera wants to know what you hiding." "Now he knows," Nathan replied, mentally calculating angles and distances. "You've seen her. You can go." "Not quite," the man replied. "Rivera thinks you might be getting soft. Says we should take something you value, just to remind you who runs the north side." What happened next occurred in heartbeats. The leader lunged toward Melanie. Nathan fired twice. The other men drew their weapons. Melanie ducked and thrust her knife forward with surprising precision. When stillness finally returned, all 3 intruders lay motionless on the imported tile floor. Nathan hurried to Melanie, checking her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though her hands trembled. "I'm fine. They didn't expect me to fight back." Nathan pulled her close, an embrace that shocked them both with its intensity. "I should never have brought you into this. I'll make arrangements for you to leave the country tonight." Melanie stepped back, her eyes flashing. I'm not going anywhere. This isn't a negotiation. Rivera will send more men. Then we'll handle them too. Her voice was steady despite the bodies cooling nearby. I knew who you were when I agreed to this arrangement. I am not running now. Nathan studied her face, the determination, the lack of horror at the violence they got just committed together. Who are you, Melanie Parrish? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Someone who chose freedom, remember, even when it's dangerous. As Marcus oversaw the cleanup, Nathan made a decision. Rivera had crossed a line. By morning, the balance of power in the city would shift permanently. Melanie watched Nathan make calls throughout the night, orchestrating a complex series of moves like a chess grandmaster. She should have been terrified, should have taken his offer to flee. Instead, she felt strangely calm, as though pieces of her life were finally clicking into place. You don't seem disturbed by any of this, Nathan observed during a rare pause between calls. I am disturbed, she clarified, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach, but not surprised. And not running. Why? She considered his question carefully. Because for the first time since my parents died, I feel like I matter to someone. Even if that someone is a dangerous man who initially just wanted to buy a child from me. First, Nathan winced at her blunt assessment. That is not it is what this was, she interrupted. But it is not what it is now, is it? The question hung between them, neither willing to name what had developed in its place. By morning, Rivera's operation lay in ruins, his allies either eliminated or switching allegiance to Nathan. The swift, decisive action sent a clear message throughout the city's underworld. Nathan Cole's household, all of it, was untouchable. As weeks passed, Melanie's pregnancy progressed. Nathan found himself accompanying her to medical appointments, asking detailed questions, reading books on fetal development. What had begun as protecting an investment had evolved into genuine concern for both mother and child. Their living arrangement changed without formal discussion. Melanie gradually moved from the guest house into the main residence, first spending evenings in Nathan's library, then taking meals with him, and finally, after a particularly honest late-night conversation, sharing his bedroom. This complicates everything, Nathan admitted as Melanie lay in his arms, her body changed by the growing life inside her. Everything was already complicated, she replied, tracing the scar on his shoulder where she had removed the bullet. We just stopped pretending otherwise. The contract they had signed, clinical and transactional, sat forgotten in Nathan's safe. Neither mentioned the $5 million or the agreement that Melanie would disappear after birth. Instead, they began cautiously discussing a future, though both were careful to keep expectations measured. Marcus remained skeptical, watching their developing relationship with concern. You realize this can't work long-term, he told Nathan during a rare moment alone. Our world doesn't allow for happy families. Others have managed it. Others haven't to made the enemies you have, and others haven't to brought in outsiders. She is not an outsider anymore, Nathan countered. You saw how she handled Rivera's men. Marcus shook his head. One incident doesn't make her one of us. What happens when she realizes exactly what your business entails, the full scope of it, or when she decides your child shouldn't be raised in this environment? The questions hit uncomfortably close to concerns Nathan himself harbored. His feelings for Melanie had grown into something he'd never experienced, something that felt dangerously like love. But the empire he had built remained fundamentally incompatible with the kind of life most women would want for their child. Melanie, however, continued to surprise him. One evening she entered his office uninvited during a tense business meeting. Instead of retreating when she saw the assembled men, all high-ranking figures in Nathan's organization, she approached the table confidently. You were discussing the harbor situation, she stated, not a question. Your plan has a significant flaw. The men looked to Nathan, unsure how to react to this pregnant woman interrupting their strategy session. Nathan, equally surprised, gestured for her to continue. With remarkable precision, Melanie outlined a security vulnerability in their planned shipment route, something none of them had identified. The room fell silent as she finished her analysis. How did you know about this operation? Nathan asked carefully. Melanie held his gaze. I pay attention. You discuss business on the phone throughout the house. Your desk has documents you don't always secure. And I'm not stupid, Nathan. Later alone, he confronted her. You've been spying on my business? I've been learning about the father of my child, she corrected. About the world we were bringing a new life into. I wanted to understand. And now that you do? Now that you have seen exactly what I am? Melanie took his hand and placed it on her rounded stomach, where a small foot or hand pressed outward. I see someone building something. Something powerful, yes, and sometimes terrible, but also something with potential. Potential for what? For change, for legacy beyond just money and fear. Her eyes met his, challenging and loving simultaneously. You wanted an heir, but what exactly are they inheriting? Have you thought about that? The question lingered between them, opening possibilities Nathan had never considered. Not just an heir to continue his empire as it existed, but perhaps someone who could transform it into something different, something better. As Melanie's pregnancy entered its final months, Nathan found himself at a crossroads. His organization had never been more powerful, Rivera's failed attack having eliminated his strongest competitor. Yet increasingly, he questioned aspects of his business that he'd never examined before. We could legitimize more of the operation, he mused one night as they reviewed his company, holdings together, a strange form of domestic intimacy neither had anticipated. Shift focus to the property developments, the tech investments. Melanie didn't respond immediately, carefully considering her words. You could. But would it be enough for you? The power you have now comes from both worlds. I've been thinking about what you said, about what our child is inheriting. She placed her hand over his. Whatever you decide, we'll face it together. The shui hung in the air, a commitment neither had formally made, but both now assumed. The contract that had brought them together had evolved into something no lawyer could have drafted. A partnership forged through danger, respect, and unexpected love. As Nathan held Melanie close that night, feeling their child, move between them, he made a silent promise to find a path forward that would honor both worlds he now inhabited, the empire he had built and the family he never expected to find. What neither realized was that the greatest test of their unconventional union was still to come, a final reckoning that would demand everything from both of them. The first contractions began during a thunderstorm that mirrored the one from the night Nathan and Melanie had first met. Rain lashed against the penthouse windows as Nathan rushed her to the private medical facility he had established solely for this purpose, staffed with the country's finest doctors, all bound by ironclad confidentiality agreements. Everything will be fine, he assured her, gripping her hand as another contraction seized her body. Despite his confident words, fear flickered in his eyes, a vulnerability few had ever witnessed in Nathan Cole. Melanie managed to smile through her pain. For someone who orchestrates complex criminal enterprises, you look terrified by a perfectly natural process. I can control business. He gestured helplessly at her contorted form. This is beyond my power. The labor progressed rapidly. Within hours, the cries of a newborn child echoed through the exclusive wing Nathan had secured. A daughter, perfectly formed, with Melanie's striking features and a determined scowl that already seemed to reflect her father's intensity. As Nathan held his child for the first time, a profound shift occurred within him, as though pieces of his life suddenly aligned with crystal clarity. The empire he had built, the power he had accumulated, the enemies he had vanquished all paled in comparison to the tiny being in his arms. She is remarkable, he whispered, carefully returning the infant to Melanie's waiting embrace. She needs a name, Melanie said softly, studying the newborn's face. Nathan hesitated. In their careful discussions of the future, they had avoided this topic, perhaps both superstitiously unwilling to tempt fate. What do you think? Lila, Melanie suggested. It means night beauty in Arabic, born in a storm like the night we met. Lila Cole. Nathan tested the name, feeling its weight and significance. Not just his heir now, but their daughter. A new beginning neither had anticipated when they struck their initial bargain. The peaceful bubble surrounding Lila's birth shattered 3 days later. Marcus burst into the private hospital suite, his normally composed demeanor visibly shaken. "We have a problem," he announced, glancing apologetically at Melanie before focusing on Nathan. "Federal agents raided the downtown office this morning. They've frozen the primary accounts and seized documents. Someone talked." Nathan's expression hardened, the brief period of domestic tranquility evaporating instantly. "Who?" "We don't know yet, but they moving fast. Coordinated hits on multiple properties. They have confidential information that only inner circle people would know." Melanie clutched Lila closer to her chest, the implications immediately clear. Their carefully constructed future was collapsing before it had truly begun. "How bad?" Nathan asked, already mentally calculating escape routes, contingency plans, hidden resources. Marcus didn't soften the blow. "Federal RICO charges. They was building a case from the ground up. Money laundering, extortion, the Rivera situation, everything. They'll be coming for you directly, likely within hours." Silence filled the room, broken only by Lila's soft coos. The weight of Nathan's past, a past he had begun to contemplate changing but had not yet addressed, now threatened everything. "Leave us," Nathan instructed Marcus, who nodded grimly and departed. Alone with Melanie and their daughter, Nathan moved to the window, staring out at the city he had once controlled. "I have contingencies. Offshore accounts they can touch, properties under different names. We can be on a private plane within the hour." "Running," Melanie said quietly. "Not a question." "Living," Nathan corrected, turning back to her. "Together, somewhere new. I can rebuild." Melanie studied him, her eyes reflecting a wisdom that had drawn him to her from the beginning. "Is that what you want? To start the same cycle somewhere else? Always looking over your shoulder, always waiting for the past to find you, to find us? What is the alternative? Prison?" She adjusted Lila in her arms, looking down at their daughter. "There might be another way." "Turning myself in," Nathan laughed bitterly. "Down with the evidence they've gathered, I'd never see daylight again." "Not quite." Melanie took a deep breath. "What if you could negotiate? You have information about people more powerful than yourself, about operations beyond your own, information that would be valuable to federal prosecutors." Nathan stared at her, understanding dawning. "You want me to become an informant?" "I want you to be Lila's father," she replied simply. "Whatever that takes." The proposition hung between them, a path Nathan had never considered, one that contradicted everything he had built his identity upon. Loyalty above all else. Never cooperate with authorities. These principles had been his foundation. "They would still want prison time," he said finally, working through the logistics. "Years, possibly." "But not a lifetime," Melanie countered. "And when you came out, we would be waiting. No more running, no more looking over our shoulders. A genuine fresh start." Nathan sank into the chair beside her bed, the weight of the decision physically palpable. "You would wait. With Lila. Despite everything." Melanie reached for his hand. "When I agreed to have your child, I thought I was making a business arrangement. I never expected—" She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I never expected to find someone who would see me, really see me, when I was invisible to the rest of the world, who would value my mind as much as what my body could provide." "I could set up trust funds," Nathan began calculating, his mind racing. "Properties transferred to your name, enough to ensure you and Lila would never want for anything, even if you change your mind while inside," Melanie finished his thought. "I'm not concerned about money, Nathan. I am concerned about our daughter growing up constantly in danger, or constantly on the run, or without her father entirely." Nathan looked at Lila, then back at Melanie, seeing the determination in her eyes, the same fierce intelligence that had first caught his attention beneath that rain-soaked awning. "I need to make some calls," he said finally. "There are people who need protection if I do this. Marcus, the legitimate employees who never knew the full extent of the business. Melanie nodded, understanding the complexity of dismantling an empire without collateral damage. Do what you need to do. We'll be here. The next 48 hours unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. Nathan's attorneys negotiated with federal prosecutors while he provided detailed information about criminal networks far larger than his own. Safe houses were arranged for key personnel who had remained loyal. Assets were strategically redistributed, some to anonymous charitable foundations, others to trust funds for Lila that even the most dedicated forensic accountants would struggle to trace. Throughout it all, Melanie remained by his side, her practical intelligence proving invaluable as they worked to secure as much of their future as possible within the constraints of their new reality. On the final evening before Nathan would surrender himself, they returned to the penthouse, now stripped of incriminating documents but still luxuriously appointed. Lila slept peacefully in a bassinet beside them as they stood on the terrace, looking out over the city lights. 15 years, Nathan said, breaking the silence. With good behavior, possibly 12. Melanie leaned against him, absorbing the timeline of their separation. We'll visit every chance they allow. I've arranged for the house in the suburbs, Nathan continued. The one we looked at online. The papers were signed this morning. It's in your name only. They're enough in the accessible accounts to ensure you never have to worry, even if all the hidden funds are eventually discovered. I told you it is not about the money. I know, but practical concerns matter. I want you both to be secure. He turned to face her fully. But I also need you to know that I am setting you free from our arrangement. The $5 million from our contract has been transferred to your private account. You owe me nothing. Melanie shook her head, a sad smile playing at her lips. After everything, you still don't understand, do you? This isn't about debts or contracts anymore. I need you to have the choice, Nathan insisted. Waiting for a convict for over a decade isn't what you signed up for. Raising a child alone isn't what you agreed to. Nothing about us has followed the original agreement, Nathan. She took his face in her hands. I am not staying because of a contract. I am staying because somehow, in the strangest of circumstances, I found someone worth waiting for. Their kiss held the bitter sweetness of impending separation and the promise of eventual reunion. When they parted, Nathan pressed his forehead to hers. "Sir, there is one more thing I need to ask," he said quietly. "Something I should have asked before all of this fell apart." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. Inside nestled a ring, not ostentatious as might have been expected from a man of his wealth, but elegant and unique, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds. "I had this made weeks ago," he admitted. "I was waiting for the right moment, which clearly isn't going to come in the traditional way." Melanie's eyes widened as she understood the implication. "Marry me," Nathan said simply. "Not now. I wanted to ask you to tie yourself legally to me while I am serving time, but someday, when I am free, if you still want me then." Tears filled Melanie's eyes as she took the ring. "I'll hold it for you," she promised, "for when you return to us." The morning brought federal agents to the penthouse door. Nathan, impeccably dressed as always, surrendered without resistance. The media, catching wind of the high-profile arrest, swarmed the building's entrance. Headlines would later proclaim the fall of one of the city's most enigmatic crime figures, though few would understand the true reasons behind his cooperation with authorities. While Nathan began his careful navigation of the legal system, Melanie and Lila relocated to the suburban home he had purchased. A beautiful property with extensive gardens and security systems so discreet that neighbors would never notice their presence. There she began the process of building a life that would be waiting for him upon his release. The years that followed brought challenges neither had fully anticipated. Lila grew from infant to toddler to young child, knowing her father primarily through prison visitations and carefully monitored phone calls. Melanie completed her education, eventually establishing a foundation that provided educational opportunities for disadvantaged women, funded, ironically, by legitimately invested proceeds from Nathan's former enterprises. Marcus, who had been protected in the federal deal, remained loyal, serving as liaison between Nathan's diminished but still considerable legitimate business interests and Melanie. Over time, he became something of an uncle figure to Lila, who delighted in his visits and the stories he would share of her father's more benign achievements. Within the prison system, Nathan found himself adapting in unexpected ways. His organizational skills and intelligence earned him respect among both inmates and guards. He completed business courses offered through the prison education program, focusing particularly on ethical corporate governance, a subject that would have made his former self laugh derisively. 8 years into his sentence, Nathan received news that federal prosecutors had used his information to dismantle one of the country's largest criminal syndicates. The resulting gratitude from law enforcement, combined with his exemplary behavior, led to a re-evaluation of his case. On a bright spring morning, 4 years earlier than expected, Nathan walked through the prison gates a free man. Melanie stood waiting, Lila's hand clasped in hers. The child, now approaching her teenage years, hung back shyly, recognizing yet not fully knowing the father she had visited throughout her childhood. "She has your eyes," Nathan observed quietly as he approached, drinking in the sight of his daughter, no longer the infant he had left behind. "And your stubbornness," Melanie replied with a smile, tears streaming freely down her face. Their embrace held the weight of years separated and the promise of a future reclaimed. When they parted, Nathan knelt before Lila, careful not to crowd her. "I've missed so much," he said simply. Lila studied him with the analytical gaze he recognized from his own mirror. "Mom says you did what you had to do to make sure we could have a real life together. Your mother is very wise." A small smile played at the corner of Lila's mouth. "She also says you were going to spoil me rotten now that you were home, and she'll have to be the strict parent." Nathan laughed, the sound rusty from disuse but genuine. "She knows me too well." The rehabilitation of Nathan Cole, both personal and public, progressed gradually. The business empire he had once ruled through fear and manipulation transformed under his guidance, with Melanie's insights proving invaluable. Legitimate enterprises flourished while former criminal connections faded into history. Their wedding, held privately in the garden of their suburban home with only Marcus and a few trusted friends as witnesses, took place exactly 1 year after Nathan's release. Lila served as her mother's maid of honor, beaming with pride as Melanie finally placed on her finger the sapphire ring Nathan had given her years before. Life settled into patterns neither could have imagined when they first struck their unusual bargain. Nathan's past was never fully forgotten. There were still those who remembered the man he had been, but the power he now wielded came from respect rather than fear, from building rather than threatening. One evening, as they sat on the terrace of their home watching Lila practice tennis on the private court Nathan had installed for her, Melanie broached a subject they rarely discussed. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "The deal you made? The years lost?" Nathan considered her question seriously, watching his daughter's determined expression as she perfected her serve. "I regret the circumstances that made it necessary. I regret not meeting you differently, building something honest from the beginning." He took her hand, running his thumb over the sapphire that now accompanied a simple wedding band. "But I don't regret where we ended up. This life, unconventional as its beginnings were, is worth every price I paid." Melanie leaned against his shoulder, remembering the coldly calculating man who had approached her in the rain so many years ago, and the transformation that neither of them could have predicted. $5 million, she mused. "That was your original offer for a child." "An insulting undervaluation in retrospect," Nathan replied dryly. "And yet what you ultimately paid was so much more." "Yes," he agreed, watching as Lila executed a perfect backhand. "I paid with the man I was, and received something priceless in return." As twilight settled over their home, the once homeless woman and the former crime lord sat in comfortable silence, their unlikely love story having transformed them both in ways neither could have imagined on that rain-soaked night when a simple business proposition had set them on a path to redemption. In the years that followed, Lila would grow into a remarkable young woman who combined her father's strategic brilliance with her mother's compassionate insight. She would eventually take over the legitimate business empire Nathan had rebuilt, transforming it further into an organization known for ethical practices and community investment. The contract that had once defined Nathan and Melanie's relationship remained locked away in a safe, a reminder of how the most unexpected beginnings can lead to the most profound transformations when two people see beyond circumstances to recognize something valuable in each other that no one else had bothered to notice. Their story, never publicly known in its entirety, became the foundation of a legacy built not on fear and power as Nathan had originally planned, but on redemption, second chances, and the enduring strength of an unlikely love that began with a price tag but ultimately proved itself priceless. As for the sapphire ring that had waited years to find its proper home on Melanie's finger, it would someday be passed to Lila, along with the true story of her parents' journey. Not as a cautionary tale, but as evidence that sometimes the heart finds its match in the most unexpected places, and that true wealth is measured not in millions of dollars, but in the courage to transform oneself for the sake of love. Wow, I told you that ending would be unexpected. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up and share your reactions in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Hearts of Crime for more captivating stories, just like this one every single day. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible tale of love in the criminal underworld. Thank you for watching until the end. May God bless you and your family, and I'll see you in the next video.